All right, everybody. I think let's go ahead and get started. As we said, can we turn this down a little bit? It's raining. It's a little hot. My name is Vincent Allen. I'm the founder of Vav Industries, or a production company and tech company based in New York City. So that's a little bit about me. My name is Vincent Allen. My company is Vav Industries. We do live streaming and broadcasting and other things of that nature, which we'll get into a little bit later. Why don't we just go down the line? Everyone introduce themselves, tell the room and the interweb who we are, where we're from, what we do. I think
Sure,
that'd be good.
I can start. Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Reena Jain. I started my career after graduating as a chemical engineer from India. I worked at Schlumberger as an oil field engineer, did that for 3 years, where I designed and executed well stimulation treatments. In my time there, which is like 3 years, I performed well stimulation for 100 plus wells and revived those 100 plus dormant wells. Post that, I moved to Universal Aquatech as the VP of Operations and Business Development. In my role there, I launched a portfolio of aquaculture feed supplement products. Post my experience in operations, I pivoted to tech. I joined an edtech startup, Cedarwood EduVentures, which is a fast-growing edtech startup headquartered in India and having a global clientele, which provides K-12 supplemental education to students. As the VP of product, amidst the pandemic, I performed a digital transformation of the 15-plus brick-and-mortar establishments. Post that, 3 years back, I moved to USA for my MBA, and during the same time, I worked as a product manager at Amazon. And post that, I joined McKinsey & Company as an operations and tech consultant. Happy to be here, and thanks for being a part of the conference. Over to you, Matthew.
Excellent. My background isn't nearly as colorful. So my name is Matthew Screddy. I'm the CTO and SVP of Product Development at LIDP. We provide software and solutions to the life insurance industry. As an organization, we've been around for about 45 years now, and I've been with the organization about 11 years now. And so came right out of college, started as a software engineer, worked my way through enterprise architecture, and now lead most of the business. And it's been a lot of fun. Our focus is mostly B2B, and so I'm actually very interested and excited to have this discussion on how we benefit the end consumers, because it's often a space I don't get to talk very much in. So I'm excited to have this discussion.
My name is Nir Alani. I'm an entrepreneur. I founded a marketing company. It's basically around search engine optimization and online marketing. I've been doing it ever since Google probably started online, and we help businesses gain more exposure and more audiences through organic search, and we basically just help them grow and improve their offerings to their target audience. Over the years, we developed a lot of technologies that helped us produce content and produce and optimize websites to better fulfill that goal. And yeah, I'm also very excited to be here and talk to everybody about tech and how we can use it for good.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it, guys. That's great to meet everybody. I think we're all super excited to be here. But let's set parameters for it, because the potential of tech for good is wildly broad, right? That could be anything. That could be the internet. It could be automotive technology. We could be talking about anything. So I think what I'd love to do is just go down the line and start everyone just in a sentence or two, sort of set their framework in terms of what tech for good, or the possibilities of tech for good, means to each one of us. I'll go ahead and start. I think for me, when you talk about technology historically, right, has always been a thing for good, driving the human species forward, whether we're talking about, agriculture and cultivating grain so we can stop looking in the forest for berries all the time, or whether we're talking about developments of writing, or, harnessing electricity, or the atom, or the internet. Tech has always been a force for good to some sense. And so I think, when we talk about the possibilities for tech for good, I think for me personally, we need to set up our camp right around who are the people making the tech, right? I was having a conversation over breakfast about AI and some of the good and the maybe not so good things with it. But and one of the big conversations right now that I see both in my industry and outside of my industry is who are the people doing the coding, and are we controlling for their personal biases, right? Because there's a lot of stuff you see in my industry in media where you don't necessarily think about it. As a Caucasian person, you don't necessarily think about, oh, that might feel aggressive to a woman or a person of color or an immigrant or a, fill in whatever you feel appropriate to fill in there. I think for me, we talk about the potential of tech for good. We can leverage tech to solve some of these age-old isms and schisms, but we have to get to the man behind the curtain first.
Vincent, that's very well said. That's very well said, and I agree with all of it. I would say that when we talk about any piece of tech, any software, any app, we think about, is it good for majority of the people? There would always be a subset of people who have a problem with it, who think, they're losing their jobs. But if it's good for majority of the people, if it's creating an impact and helping them in any possible way to make their life easier, efficient, I would brand it as a tech which has a potential for good. Now, coming to your point of when it comes to AI ML models, we do know that biases seep in, right?
Sure, of course.
And definitely, I believe that a tech has more potential to be good if these biases are taken care of, if these bad actors are taken care of. We will talk more about this during the rest of the panel, but these are my thoughts on, potential of tech
It's very
for the
interesting.
good.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, so, when I started on thinking about what to talk about with this panel, I guess what I came to a conclusion of was, how do we as a software vendor provide value to the end consumer? And kind of the end result I came to was education. And, we talked a little bit about that during breakfast this morning, but ensuring that the end consumer knows what they're getting, right? Knows how to interact with our clients, because we're mostly B2B, but also making sure that they're educated on products within the marketplace, that they know that they're making an informed and logical decision for whatever they're doing, whether it's insurance or marketing or whatever it may be. If you're not able to make those types of informed decisions, if you don't have the information available to you as an end consumer, then, how can you ensure you're making the right decision with some of these things, right? So, sharing information and ensuring that all that is readily available is I think where we strive for as an organization as well, right? Knowledge sharing and all that kind of good stuff. So, I think in my couple sentences, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, it's just to balance on what you said, and we also discussed this earlier. Part of our strategy as well is very focused on educating the end user, like you said. When we help businesses try to gain more exposure, we do it mostly by providing the best value we can for specific problems that the end user might have, and educating them about how they can be solved and how they can use this businesses that we promote to that end. So over the years now, everybody's talking about AI, right? So we started using AI in our products, in our models, to kind of create better products and content solutions within the marketing field to help these businesses and just spread more. You could call it educational content. I don't know exactly.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I think it's a very important thing that a lot of the end user, at the end of the day, everybody's online now. He's very informed about what he's getting.
Absolutely.
No, fair enough. And I mean, both of you, two gentlemen, brought up the specter of education. And I think that that's a huge thing when you're talking about for good in any context, right? I think that in today's world, you have both a highly educated user base in most environments, but that also, I think, has pivoted on the fulcrum of people knowing a lot of facts, but not really knowing what they mean.
Right.
And so you have people who have a lot of access to the internet and are perfectly capable of using Google, but don't necessarily know how to quantify that information.
Exactly.
And we see that in everything from medicine, where someone, self-diagnoses on WebMD,
Yeah.
right? And then all of a sudden everyone's dying of cancer, right? and then you had to our political discourse to, as a former journalist and someone who's held a press card, it's how people perceive us, right? And what we're doing as media creators or whatever. And so I think that I'd love if everyone would just talk a little bit about like how you, in your specific silos, how you both educate your users, but then also quantify that data in some type of a way so that they're not so that it doesn't just become wild theories after another based on a data set that can be manipulated in one direction or another.
Perfect. I think in general, yes, educating the users about the tech they are using or the software or the product they are using is essential. But I would like to talk a bit in detail about how tech impacts education sector as a whole.
Okay.
I think it plays a huge role and has a huge potential to improve education on the whole. I will talk about 3 initiatives which created huge lasting impact. First, for example, there was an initiative called as OLPC, which is 1 laptop per child.
Right.
This was to provide laptops to children in underserved populations who could not afford laptops for their education. This initiative benefited 3 million children because it gave them access to education online. So before we dive into the education, I think the means
Right.
to
Sure.
receive that education needs to be talked about. So great initiative. However, because of various reasons, it had to be shut down. But it definitely has a huge potential to create an impact because it did in the past affect like 3 million children. And if it can be scaled up, then every child would have education in his hand in third world developing countries, in underserved nations, everything. Moving on to the second, this is not an initiative, but piece of tech. The second piece of tech, which I think has created great impact, is AR/VR. I remember, as a child, I had so much trouble wrapping my head around the carbon structure of diamond. It would be like a 3D structure, and my parents would struggle with matchsticks and ping pong balls to explain me the structure. And while I was working at Siddharwood EduVentures a few years back, it deals with K-12 supplemental education, and I was working on a boot camp for providing these students with AR/VR headsets. And I tried it on, and trust me, I realized that I wasted so much time and effort as a kid trying to wrap my head around a 3D structure when now I just put on the glass, and it's so easy to grasp information now.
Right.
You just watch a YouTube video and you can understand the 3D structure where you don't have to draw it on a 2D paper and struggle with it. So it creates such a huge impact. It saves so much in time and effort. Third, and my favorite initiative, I would say, is Project Loon. Now, this was initiated by Google, but now it has moved into an Alphabet subsidiary called Loon LLC. And it was used not for education, but in disaster-stricken areas where they would release these hot air balloons, if I can say in, non-technical language, a hot air balloon over these areas which would serve internet to the population during times of disaster.
I remember that.
This connects globally 200K plus people. In 2017, Puerto Rico, post the havoc created by Hurricane Maria, this hot air balloon or Project Loon was launched in Puerto Rico, and then, it in a way mitigated the impact of the disaster just because people were able to better connect
Sure.
with the emergency responses. So these are the three initiatives which, I briefly spoke about, and there's a lot more that would be, helpful for education, and that's over to you all. And please highlight, ways in which you think tech can help education or adjacent industries.
So, getting back to Vincent's question too,
Yep.
and building off of yours, where when we start talking about education being important, it absolutely is. But then how do you ensure that that information being shared is A, appropriate, and B, meaningful, right? So specifically within my industry, within life insurance, right, we have laws and regulations that require agents, brokers, and fiduciary-based laws that say, you have to be able to educate them, and they have to be able to understand certain things. And so I think those types of rules and regulations are important only because that's not only ensuring the sharing of that information, but also ensuring that, you're not trying to misinterpret the information to benefit yourself, right? And that's where these rules come into play, and they're important. And certainly they're important across all of these developing technologies, right? I mean, you can slap anything in AR, VR as well, right? And making sure that it's appropriate is incredibly important. So I guess, excuse me, specifically within my industry, it's already highly regulated, but some of these new technologies are coming out so fast, laws and regulations can't keep up with them, readily. And so I don't have a solution for that right away, but it is something that, we need to take into consideration to ensure that, as technology grows and evolves, we as an economy and as a country and as a global society are able to keep up with those types of things.
Well,
And-
I think, Matt, if I could jump in for a second, if any of us had a solution to that, we'd all be much wealthier people than we presently are.
Absolutely, yeah.
And maybe not be sitting on this. We'd be sitting on a bigger podium, maybe. But no, 100%. And I think I would love to hear your perspectives on everything that's been said so far.
Yeah, well, so within my specific industry, which is the online marketing, it's a little bit more simpler than what you both discussed, but still, yeah, with the emerging technologies in the recent years, AI and all that stuff, information is so widely spread, and most of the time it's misinformed, like you say. So easy to create misinformed content or videos or whatever now. So at least for us, we try to be as research as possible as we can and responsible as we can. So the information that we share provides value and accurate, right? And I think, again, the AI world is not regulated right now at all, and everybody can pretty much do whatever they want. So it's on the individual companies to basically, be responsible, which is, again, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. Sometimes you need regulations, but sometimes you don't want to over-regulate as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's always a tension, right?
It's always a tension,
It's a conversation we've been having. And I've said this on panels like this for years now, as Sean would remember, is that regulation, whether it's a local state entity or a federal government of some type, someone is going to step in and regulate eventually. We look at what happened in Europe with GDPR. Like GDPR didn't just happen. It happened because nobody was stepping in and doing the real regulatory work that needed to be done.
Yeah.
And when you look at things like AI, ML, but then you look at the VR scape, but not even most people don't understand what VR is. Most people aren't in production, have never looked down a lens, don't understand, when you're building something for the Sphere just up the road, that you need to use a special type of lens, or you need to anamorphically adjust your video so that it doesn't create problems when trying to project something on a curved screen, right? Most people don't understand those things, and that's okay. They don't have to, because it's not their line of business. But that is where governments and other entities need to step in and do the regulatory work, because then you do get like the deep faking, and that's going to be. It's already hard for most people to tell what's real and what's not. It's going to be so much harder in VR, right? When in another year or two, when the render tech is so much better so that things do look photorealistic, right? Which that's happening already, and it's coming.
already happening.
Yeah, right. And it's just going to continue to get better. What I'd like to I'd like to pivot us there and talk a little bit about the AR VR space for a minute or two. I mean, you brought it up, and I think and I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it. I think that the potential goods of VR AR significantly outweigh the potential bads. When you think about, like I remember when I was a child, you used to give kids these little slips of colored plastic if they were having trouble reading or having trouble focusing on the words on the page, right? To help their eyes, right? The potential for the AI underpinning a VR space, a classroom, let's say, to transform in an instant text on a page to help a child who's dyslexic or dyscalculic. It's like that's already being worked on, that's already being done. That's a huge, for good, right? The potential negatives, I think obviously there's always going to be bad actors. There's always going to be someone who tries to exploit things. So I'd love to hear your guys' perspective on your individual fields, and then just in a more general sense of what do you think is happening now, what's working, what's not working, and where we go from here.
For sure. I completely agree with your point that, with GDPR, we know that Europe has a much more stringent data privacy as compared to US, because in US, there's no federal rule. It's by the states, and it's different for different industries. Finance has much more stronger as compared to marketing, probably not as much. So definitely we do need regulations for data privacy, although when it comes to bad actors or biases which creep in, I don't think there's a way as of now to detect that and to regulate that. We will get there, no doubt. But
if I could interject just for a second in terms of the bad actors, I think that, and I guess what I'd love an answer to from you is it, I personally think that it is more important to solve the issue while the code's being written, as opposed to now we're in Ready Player One, and there's bias in the code because the code was written potentially by a middle-aged or older Caucasian male who went to Yale on a legacy scholarship, right? And their perspectives are their perspectives because that's all they know, right? And about including others in those processes that are from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic levels, et cetera, so that the rich diversity that we see in the actual world is that we do something to not create a situation that builds on, like I said before, the isms and schisms that have held so many back in our actual world.
I completely agree. I would say that it needs to be tested before it is launched.
Of course.
And a great way of testing, I come from a product management background, so I would say a great way of testing it is actually test it before we, move on to the regulations, which would be.
So you're saying we shouldn't release a $5,000 dev kit into the wild market and just see what happens, just freely?
No, you can test it at a small scale, use the testing as a product manager, or, you don't have to launch it, get it out in the market before that.
Understood.
And secondly, you spoke about the way AR, VR can help dyslexic kids. Definitely. Today, tech can help accessibility point of view and inclusion point of view. For example, there's an app called as Be My Eyes app. This is for visually impaired people who get paired with sighted volunteers. They help them do their daily task and help them facilitate the daily task by live video calls. Think of this in an AR, VR situation. It doesn't have to be for the visually impaired, but something like navigation through the streets of an urban center, ensuring safety of the disabled person in whichever way possible. So definitely, I think that this has, in a general way, this plays a huge role for people with special needs,
right?
People who need more care, attention.
Sure.
So definitely.
Gentlemen?
Over to you.
Yeah, I guess it's a little hard in my specific field, only because VR and AR isn't really a thing in our industry quite yet. I was actually just telling them this morning, there's a lot of prospects in the financial industry that are still on mainframe with COBOL. So talking about VR is a little like they don't
The
care
year
about
3000?
that. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, I don't see it in use in my specific industry very much, but personally, I see AR being a real game changer, and I've personally already started using it. I know I've always liked having multiple screens. In my office, I've got 4 monitors. At home,
Sure.
I've got 6. So the more real estate has always been better for me. And I've got the MetaQuest 3, and I tried doing the multiple screens and stuff, and I loved it. Obviously, I need glasses. I've got astigmatism, and it's helped me squint less. So actually, my astigmatism's lessened, which has been what's forced me to wear glasses. Now, it hasn't helped my screen fatigue because I'm staring at screens now longer than usual, but it's helped me not, I still get to multitask, but I don't have, it's helping me, which has been really great. So I see AR, augmented reality, where you're still part of your surrounding, you're not completely taken away, but you still have those kind of productivity tools being incredibly important.
So you just don't want to beam inside the actuarial table like Wonka Vision? That's not what you
I would do it. I'm not going to lie. I would do it, but I don't know if I do it yet.
Right. So you don't. Obviously, things like finance and insurance, law.
Right.
These things are usually the last bastions of whatever the old guard of technology
Absolutely,
was.
yeah.
You don't see that that's going to change anytime soon for your industry.
Soon, no, I really don't. Like I said, we struggle so much within the financial industry to just adopt, 10-year-old tech that
Right.
I don't see it being adopted anytime in the near future for sure. But how getting into the sales and marketing side of it, how an end consumer might be able to interact with their agent or their broker or get the information they need to make an informed decision is probably closer than the corporations using it in any kind of
Right. So you're
real
suggesting
fashion.
that you think more from like a B2C kind of
Exactly,
standpoint, where
exactly.
if you're the salesperson, you're interacting with your potential client or a long-term client in a headset.
Yeah, yeah.
Potentially. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. There are a lot of folks within the life insurance industry where our clients today, even, they'll walk out to John Doe or Jane Doe's house and try and sit with them and sell them a policy. That's the norm within the industry today. Well, if you could virtually interact with that same person so they get the same feel of human interaction, that would be huge, right? Now you're able to sell not just locally, wherever you're able to drive. Right now you're able to get that same level of interaction, wherever you may be. I could see that being in use, assuming the technology gets there, right? And the more photorealistic, 'cause
Right.
you still don't want to see an avatar, you want to see the person, right?
100%.
And so I guess that's where I see it in our industry today, but I'd also like to piggyback on one of your assertions here too, which is introducing that personal bias into coding. How do you see that being a problem?
How do I see it being a problem?
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's a problem in a couple ways, right? We see this in aside from coding, just in our media sphere today, right? That where you don't see the representation you need, if you are a part of a group that's othered in one way or another. Just
Sure.
pick one; it doesn't matter. For the sake of this conversation, is when you don't have that representation either in the media or in the rooms that are building things. That's how you get news desks that with the news anchors out for every station that all look the same, right? That don't represent the community that they're broadcasting into. In the same way, you get video game characters that maybe don't, a young child doesn't see themselves in that character, and so they can't dream as much, right? Not that they can't suspend disbelief and all of that sort of thing, but if you're a young person who is anything other than white, historically you haven't had those opportunities to see a person on television or in the movies or in a video game that you identify with from a racial ethnographic standpoint. So I think that's part of it. But then I also think we see this with AI. Wasn't it a few years ago where there was a bot out there and it got onto Twitter and it was wildly racist within 5 minutes, right? I mean, so on that level, I think that there are certain turns of phrases that most of us would agree today are not okay, right? But there are also people out there in internet land that would maybe not agree, right? And so then when you have that introduced into the code base, now that if I'm a person who that slur, let's say, is meant to target, if I'm in a game or in an environment that I'm paying money to be involved in, and now I'm getting attacked with a slur that's historically marginalized the people group from which I'm from, how am I supposed to feel about that? Right? And so I think that's why it's important to make sure you have the diversity in the room of every type, not just color or gender or whatever, all groups, so that you have the representation you need. Because I'm not going to be able to speak authoritatively about the things that impact you, right? Whether that's a racial thing or a gender thing or a whatever thing. And so I think that's why it needs to be in the code base.
Yeah,
I have a question about what you said just now and at the beginning. Don't you think, though, it will hurt the growth of development if you're putting restrictions while you try to advance technology? I think you should do whatever you want at first and then regulate it, not put the people in the room while you build it.
Well, I don't think we're talking about regulations. I think we're talking about common sense.
Okay.
I think that I think that me, as a white man, I understand how much privilege I have just by being who I am. Yeah. But not everybody does, right? And so there are brilliant people from every group on Earth, like true brilliance, right? There's also idiots in every group on Earth, right? And so the hard part is knowing how to pick a brilliant person versus an idiot, right? Who's just gonna parrot whatever they heard on television or what have you. That's challenging. Hiring is challenging in every market, right? Yeah. But it's if you put true brilliance in the room, you're not going to hinder the development. But what you will do is be able to have a conversation about, hey, no, let's not make that character say that, or putting this character in that outfit is going to cause people of one group or another to lose their mind, so maybe we should not do it, right? There are certain things that most of us in society know we shouldn't say, right? There are certain things, like as men, right? We know you're not supposed to call women, right? There are certain things you're not supposed to say, right? And so you don't. It's common sense. Like most of us know those things. Some people don't. And the challenge is not putting the people in the room to make the decisions that are going to make poor ones, right? But putting people in the room that are going to be brilliant and are going to advance the development of whatever the piece of tech we're talking about is, while not imbuing it with the most vile and putrid versions of humanity that we've had. I think the trick is to not retread things we've done in the past that, looking back, all kind of make us cringe and make us a little uncomfortable. A great historian once said, if you read any point in history and you're not a little bit uncomfortable, it might be time to check on your humanity. Right? So that's the point I'm making, is that I think we move forward, we still develop, but if you put the right people in the room, it's not about regulating it at that stage, but it's about not building the bias into the new system because we haven't bothered to look in the mirror. That's what I'm saying.
And I think Rena hit on that too, right? Where it's like, as part of that product workflow, I mean, that's just, that needs to be part of it, right? Is making sure that you're managing the expectations of the product, the release of the product, all of those aspects. It's typically not just a single individual, right? So it's the responsibility of the organization that's funding those projects and that's ensuring that it's getting out to market in a quote unquote safe state, right? Where that can be used appropriately. I think that's an important note there.
And I think that's the piece that's missing. I think we've all seen a lot of stories, whether it's Fortnite or Roblox or whatever, the stuff that is out there in the wild presently, where they haven't put that kind of thought into it, and it gets abused, right? Like there have been articles written about places you can go in Roblox that are very, let's say, just adult, right? And it's adults doing adult things, but there's no guardrails for children who are in the environment from finding that. And then stumbling upon grown people doing grown people things, and you've got an 8-year-old stumbling across that and then taking their headset or whatever off or putting their iPad down and asking mommy and daddy what they're doing. Like that, there does need to be, I think it does lead us to the regulation place, right? Like anytime we're talking about building new things, humans have historically used new things for really good things and really horrendous things, right? I mean, we all saw Oppenheimer, right? I mean, we all know what we're like as a species. Like we have a tendency to be horrible, you know, when we have the opportunities to be. And so I think it's about both doing common sense things, but then I also think it's about putting those guardrails in place so the bad actors that we all know are going to show up eventually, or just bad actors is too strong, people who just don't care. Right, then we all know people like that in our personal lives that they're just like, I'm going to do me, you're too politically correct, I don't care what you think, da-da-da-da-da. Like, are going to do things that will cause harm to another without giving thought to it. And I think that's the regulation piece. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts.
I would, getting back to your point, Matthew, I would love to give an example of the way biases creep into AI/ML models and how it affects people. There's a study done where a company which used AI/ML model for resume shortlist for hiring. So they were hiring people, and there was a study in which a same resume was used, everything same, just the name of the person was changed. First, it was a male name, a unisex name such as Alex, which can be both a woman's name and a man's name, and third, a woman's name, the same resume. And it was shown that the man's resume, when selected with the same details, he was offered a higher salary, higher than the unisex one, higher than the woman one. What does this show? This just shows us the way that biases which crept into this model, because historically, men on average earn higher than women. This is a clear example of that.
Definitely.
And Winston, to your point, I love the point where you mentioned that when it comes to people training these models, there should be diversity there.
Yeah.
That's a point which I've never heard, and I think that's valuable. That's very helpful. I think that instead of regulating it at a later stage, from the start, make sure that there are minimum biases which creep in.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's just less things to fix, day
things
two.
to fix, exactly.
Right, it's as from a project management, program management standpoint, you're always going to have day two punch list, no matter what you're doing. Whether you're building a house or building a software application, there's always going to be punch list. That's never going to go away, right? But if we can mitigate the amount of big things that need to be fixed when the customer's like, give me my shiny thing, right? I think that's where it goes to, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's actually an excellent point, right? There's also been such a high demand of, I want it now, right? Where it's like, when do you make the time? And I think to your point, right? You have to make the time. It's our responsibility to make the time, right? We can crank out code and we can crank out products probably faster than we'd like to or than we should. So I think that's definitely an interesting point. I think your AI/ML example is an excellent. Well,
I think, Matt, to your point, I think our ability to crank out code is only getting faster.
Oh, absolutely.
There are only more programmers coming out of school every minute. And we've talked about a lot of things, but with the rising tide of AI, right? It's Google's model 6 months ago, before they rebranded it, could code. They turned it off, right? Because of what people were doing with it, right? But the capability's there, right? And that's only going to get better, right? And over time, so you're only going to have more people cranking out code for whatever reason or whatever purpose that they want to crank that code out for. And so I think that is the point where we do have to have, at both at the lowest level and at the highest level and everywhere in between, these critical conversations about who's in the room, right? Because it's, usually the person that's not in the room is the person that's going to get marginalized, right? The group that historically doesn't have, in any corner of this planet, in any epoch in history, the group that doesn't have the access to the structures of power is the group that's getting marginalized next, right? And the history tells us that, right? And so I think, we have to do better because we know better now, and we have to put the people in the room, which leads to the regulation place. And this cuts across every industry, right? You talk about, data security. I mean, things have to be regulated, or people won't. If it's a gray area, someone will tap dance in it, right? And so I'd love to continue the conversation and hear you guys' perspectives on how you think that regulation needs to take place, like across your various different industries. I know, Matt, your industry, of the people on this panel, yours is probably the most regulated.
Absolutely.
And so I'm sure you're not chomping at the bit to be more regulated. I'm sure it definitely makes your life more complicated. But let's start with you.
Sure.
About how you think that as these things, AI and all the other stuff, how you think that regulation needs to show up.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point. And, you made the point, do I want it to be more regulated? My answer is actually yes. Okay. I actually like the ability for us, within our platform, we already make it configurable so that, we can easily add some of those rules, and, we don't need to make as many code changes for the regulations. But what it does for us is it ensures that our product and our platform is not only suiting the need of our clients, but of our clients' clients, right? Because we're more B2B. And so, if anything, it makes me feel more comfortable in our platform. So I actually like the more regulation, right? And I think as it evolves and as the technology comes in, as a software vendor, like you said, it's our responsibility to ensure that we're using it correctly until those regulations come out. I know I sit on the board for a couple of different life insurance organizations and stuff like that, and we've already started discussing what do we want to put in place for the organizations who are members.
Right.
Whether or not the federal regulation is there, if you want to be a member of our life insurance council, of our society of actuaries and stuff like that, these are the things you have to do organizationally, right? These are the things that you have to be, the rules you have to follow, because that ensuring that the clients, the end consumers have the information they need, getting back to that knowledge is, we don't want to be deceptive. We don't want to be, tricking people into thinking
Sure.
they're getting a product that's not what it actually is, right?
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt. I think when we talk about regulation, we always think about this macro
Right.
thing where it's GDPR or whatever, right? And we don't often hear people talking about how individual companies or consortiums, as it were, can regulate themselves, can
Right.
choose to have policies that are in fact more stringent than what the law requires.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think that is a salient point.
I'm curious how it affects you guys, because, like I said, it's already fairly regulated for me, so I don't know what your guys' perspectives are.
To be honest, on the marketing side, I don't see a lot of regulation, and I think like the market decides basically,
Right.
and the market regulates. So if you put a marketing campaign or a content campaign out there, the market is the one to judge you, so to speak,
Sure.
and to show you what is right and what is wrong. And again, I'm coming back to that point because I feel it's important to have balance and
Right.
not kill creativity
Sure.
before it even happens, right? So specifically in my field, which is different from your field, I feel like it's a good idea to let creativity flow and, again, regulate it later and let the market decide what is right and what is wrong. Obviously, within the common sense.
Right.
Yeah. So this is like my point of view, specifically to my industry. It's very different. I think it's very
Absolutely.
different.
I feel like of all the people on the panel, our fields are probably the most similar because you're doing a marketing campaign that's comprised maybe of, videos or photography that
Yeah.
my field is producing, right? And so I just wonder what your thoughts are. Because we've seen this happen where people put a campaign out, it's a large company, and it gets taken down very quickly because something in the campaign the market decided was horrendous,
Yeah.
right? And we've seen like Gap ads or Old Navy ads where they have somebody in a hoodie that says a particular word across it or has or Target where they're selling a particular thing during a certain time of year, and very quickly they pull all that stuff out, right?
But I think it's a good thing. I think the outcome is a good thing because, again, the market decides if you should do it or not, and not a few people in a room
Sure.
that maybe, again, they could be very representative, but they can't represent everyone. And I
Sure.
think, again, this is specifically for the marketing field. I think you need to let the creativity flow and be wrong sometimes. It's okay to also be wrong within the realms of, laws and common sense.
Sure.
So that's my idea of it.
Okay.
I will talk in general because I'm a consultant. I work for various industries, so I don't have a particular industry. But I will talk about tech throughout these industries and why, regulations play a huge role in this. Also reiterating a bit of what we spoke, I think that there should be guardrails at every stage and not just at a higher regulation level. As Vincent shed light on, that while coding your AI/ML models or while coding a software, diversity would help reduce the biases. Not just at that level, even at the testing level. Next, moving on to the higher overarching judiciary level, where they are like similar to GDPR, there are data privacy laws which
Sure.
are federal. For example, the issue which US has with TikTok regarding the data privacy, it may not be, it wouldn't be the case had we had something similar or as stringent as GDPR.
Sure.
And coming to Neil, your point that including diversity may lower the quality of the product or may take longer time. Not the
That's
exact
quality,
words, not the
it's-
exact words, but
Yeah.
I think that with large language models coming up, with ChatGPT 4 coming up, with all this, coding has become easier, where you have no code platforms, you can pick and drop, where you can ask ChatGPT that write me a code for this, and it does it for you. So I think there has been huge improvement in coding as well, in terms of tech, and I think that diversity may in a way slow down things at the start, but it would give you quality at the end of it.
Give you a better base.
It would give you a better base. It would reduce the time which would go in resolving the biases later on, because it's just more difficult.
Yeah.
I think to put a pin on it, I think what I think everyone is suggesting is I get it, you don't want to stifle the creativity, but having more voices and being more collaborative has never in the history of humanity not created a masterpiece, right? You don't get the Sistine Chapel just by one person painting, right? You don't. So I think that there's, you're right, it'll take longer. More voices always mean just settling on a time to schedule a meeting. It might take weeks, but
It took us weeks to
yeah.
set up a meeting and we didn't do it.
right. On that note, we are running a little short of time, and so I wanted to open it up to the audience here to see, are there any questions or anything that anyone wants to ask the panel, or any commentaries, complaints? Anything?
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned about social media, YouTube being amazing, which it is, but we all know that, recently with the, Congress is President Zuckerberg and what social media has done to young people.
Sure.
What is your take on that?
Well, I think I'll start with that. I don't think Zuck's opinion on most things is salient. I mean, he's brilliant without question, and he's created a brilliant product, a series of products. But he's not the right person to ask about adolescent psychology, right? Right. But having said that, I think that social media has changed the way we interact. But there's a study that just recently came out, which the name eludes me at the moment, that says that cataloged, comments, mean or otherwise, over a 20-year period, and the comments that people were making on the internet in the 90s aren't necessarily less mean than what they're making today, is what the study showed, right? And so I think it's interesting, but we've only got about a minute left, so I'd love to let you guys respond.
Yeah, sure. So I guess it's hard to say, right? I mean, this level of interaction in social media is still relatively new within, human history. It's, there's studies being done, there's research being done, and certainly there's more to be researched, more to be analyzed, but, this is the most humans have interacted globally in forever. And so I don't necessarily think it's the Zuckerbergs of the world's problem to solve. Like you said, he's not a child psychologist. Should we have child psychologists doing the analysis of what this is doing? Absolutely, right? And that's where the laws and the regulations need to come into place, is the understanding of what this impact is to set those boundaries, because even the people who are developing the software, they don't know, right?
Right.
So, you know, like you said, I mean, it's a tool, just like everything else, and can it be abused? Absolutely. So.
It should be up to the parents to police.
Well, I think that's the secret sauce with everything, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
whether it's a cell phone or television or the internet or anything, right? It's always down to what a governmental entity tells you you're allowed to do, and what you as a parent or me as a father decides I'm comfortable with my 9-year-old interacting with. Like, her friends are on Roblox. She's not, because I know what's out there, and so I don't let her go on there, right? So I think it's always down to that.
Very interesting points on this topic. We'll have to discuss this in your downtime together and keep the energy going, but we're going to move on to our next speaker. Thank you, experts, for empowering our vision with invaluable insights.